Mount Everest is the ultimate test of human endurance, a place where dreams come true or end in tragedy. Every year, climbers risk everything to stand on top of the world, but not all of them make it back. The mountain is littered with the bodies of those who didn't survive, frozen in time as eerie reminders of Everest's deadly nature. Some of these deaths are so bizarre, tragic, or mysterious that they haunt climbers to this day. In this video, we're diving into 5 of the most disturbing deaths on Mount Everest, stories that will send chills down your spine. Standing at 29,032 feet above sea level, Jason Kennison felt the sting of thin air at the summit of Mount Everest. His breath came in short, white puffs, disappearing into the endless expanse of the sky. Below him, the world stretched in all directions, jagged, snow-covered peaks of the Himalayas, shimmering under the thin veil of sunlight. The moment should have been euphoric. It should have been everything he dreamed of. For Jason, this climb wasn't just about reaching the highest point on Earth. It was about defying fate itself. In 2006, a devastating car accident left him paralyzed. Doctors told him he would never walk again. That was supposed to be the end of his journey, but Jason refused to accept that fate. Against all odds, he stood, he walked, and now he conquered. His ascent was more than a mountaineering achievement. It was a statement, a final act of defiance against the impossible. He had dedicated this climb to a higher purpose, raising funds for Spinal Cord Injuries Australia, determined to inspire others to fight for their own second chances. But Everest has never been kind to those who celebrate too soon. The thin air at the summit was turning against him. A dull headache crept in, slow at first, then vicious. His breaths became shallow. Something was wrong. A wave of nausea hit him like a sledgehammer, and his vision blurred. The once stunning view twisted into a dizzying nightmare. His movements grew sluggish, uncoordinated. His body was failing him. The Sherpa guiding him, Dawa Stephen, saw it instantly. Jason was in trouble. The team rushed to help, but the mountain does not wait for second chances. They needed to get him down, fast. With painstaking effort, they guided Jason to a place known as the Balcony, a precarious resting point at 27,600 feet. But time was running out. The oxygen tanks were nearly empty. Jason's condition was worsening. The Sherpa faced an agonizing decision: stay and risk everyone's lives, or descend and come back with reinforcements. They made the only choice they could. The group left, promising to return. But Everest is a cruel and merciless beast. As they descended to Camp 4 to resupply, the winds howled with deadly force, trapping them below. The weather shifted violently, cutting off their path back to Jason. He was alone, stranded in the death zone. With no oxygen, no help, and no way out, Jason Kennison took his final breath on the unforgiving slopes of Everest. His body, now frozen in time, became part of the mountain itself, another soul claimed by the world's highest graveyard. His family mourned, but they did not regret. Jason had chased his dream to the very edge of existence, and he had won. He had conquered Everest, but Everest had claimed him in return. The crisp, merciless air sliced through Peter Schwartz's senses as he jolted awake on May 24, 2023. But this wasn't Vancouver. This wasn't the warmth of his home. This was Camp 4, perched at a staggering 26,247 feet on the icy slopes of Mount Everest. Peter was in the heart of the death zone, where the air is too thin to sustain life. His breaths were short, ragged. A headache pounded against his skull. A wave of nausea twisted in his stomach. Something was wrong. At 63 years old, Peter wasn't just any climber. A respected anesthesiologist at UBC and Vancouver General Hospital, he had spent his life navigating the fine line between life and death. But here, on Everest, the odds were different. This was his dream, a lifelong pursuit fueled by a relentless spirit. He had trained, he had prepared, he had made it this far, and now the summit was within reach. But Everest doesn't care about dreams. The mountain whispers warnings in the wind, subtle at first, a pounding skull, a tightening chest, a creeping dizziness. These are the first signs, the mountain's way of testing your resolve, luring you forward even as it tightens its grip. Peter had a choice. He could push on, chase his dream, or listen to the warning signs clawing at his body. With the howling winds as his only witness, he made the call. He would descend. It was the right decision, but it would not save him. The journey down was just as treacherous as the climb up. Every step became heavier. The mountain fought back. The winds lashed against his body. The icy slopes turned treacherous beneath his feet. He aimed for Camp 2, where a helicopter waited to take him to safety. But first, he had to reach Camp 3. As he staggered downward, his body began to betray him. His legs weakened. His breaths grew erratic. The nausea worsened. Every step was a battle. His once steady pace became unsteady, sluggish. His vision blurred. The mountain was pulling him under. Still, he pushed forward. Camp 3 was close. So close. But Everest had already made its decision. Darkness crept in. His vision dimmed. His body refused to go any further. And then, nothing. The brutal cold wrapped around him like a final embrace. His weary eyes locked on the short distance to Camp 3, but his body would never make it. The altitude sickness had won. Everest had claimed another. Peter Schwartz collapsed, his breath stolen by the mountain. His heart, weakened by the relentless altitude, gave out in the silent, frozen abyss. His body remained on the eroded slopes, yet another fallen climber in Everest's vast, icy graveyard. Back home, his loved ones grieved, but not with regret. He had lived fully, fearlessly, relentlessly. He had faced Everest head-on, knowing the risk, knowing the cost. His journey ended in the mountain's grasp, but his legacy remained unbroken, a testament to the unstoppable human spirit that dares to reach for the impossible. Because on Everest, not all victories mean survival. The frigid winds howled like ghosts through the jagged peaks of Mount Everest. Gimi Tenji Sherpa stood on the icy slopes of the Khumbu icefall, the weight of his pack pressing heavily against him. But his face, weathered, strong, unreadable, betrayed no sign of strain. He had done this before. At 38 years old, Gimi was no ordinary climber. A veteran Sherpa, he had conquered Everest multiple times, guiding others to the summit, ensuring their survival while risking his own life with every ascent. The Himalayas were his home, their dangers as familiar to him as breathing. But Everest does not care how many times you've bested it. It was April 14th, 2022. Another expedition, another climb. His mission was routine: carry supplies to Camp 2. Alongside a dozen other Sherpas from international mountain guides, he moved through the deadly Khumbu icefall with practiced precision. The football field, a relatively stable section of the icefall at 17,999 feet, lay ahead. Compared to the chaotic maze of shifting seracs and deep crevasses elsewhere, this stretch was a momentary reprieve. But Everest does not give reprieves. Somewhere along the ascent, it happened. A sudden wave of nausea crashed over him. His chest tightened. His breath, once steady, controlled, turned shallow and ragged. Panic crept in. Something was wrong. He pressed forward, willing his body to obey. He had done this 100 times. But his vision blurred. His legs wobbled beneath him. The weight of his pack felt unbearable, though he had carried heavier loads before. His body was failing him. Desperate, Nima stopped. He turned, searching for his fellow climbers, but saw no one. He was alone. The nausea grew worse. His breathing became erratic. The mountain spun around him. He tried to push on, but his body rebelled. His only option now was to wait. He sank to the ice, still strapped into his pack, hoping a few moments of rest would restore his strength. They didn't. The cold crept in. His vision dimmed, his fingers numbed. The howling wind drowned out everything but the faint, distant beat of his failing heart. Then silence. When they found him at 4 a.m., he was still sitting upright, his backpack secured tightly to his body. His face was peaceful, as if he had simply closed his eyes and drifted away. But Everest had claimed another. No signs of a fall, no avalanches, no trauma, only the silent killer, high-altitude sickness. It was cruel irony. A Sherpa, a guardian of the mountain, taken by the very force he had spent his life mastering. A third of all deaths on Everest belonged to Nepali guides and porters, the unsung heroes who carry the weight of others' dreams, often at the cost of their own lives. And Nyingma Teni Sherpa was now among them. His story was not just another statistic. It was a warning, a reminder that Everest, for all its allure, is not a prize to be won. It is a force to be survived. The icy wind cut through Christopher John Coolish as he stood on the slopes of Mount Everest, his 62-year-old frame bracing against the rising sun. It was May 27, 2019, and before him stretched a sight few ever witnessed, the roof of the world, bathed in golden light. This was the moment he had dreamed of. For Christopher, an American lawyer and passionate mountaineer, Everest wasn't just a mountain. It was the final piece of a lifelong journey. He wasn't here just to stand on top of the world. He was chasing the 7 summits, the elite club of climbers who had conquered the highest peak on every continent. But Everest does not give victories. It takes them. Christopher had trained for years, honing his body and mind against some of the harshest landscapes on Earth. He was no amateur. He knew the dangers of altitude, the thin air, the bone-shattering cold. His team climbed steadily, making their way through serpentine ice fields and towering ridges, the mountain momentarily kind to them. The weather held. The winds were still. It was as if Everest welcomed them forward. But Everest is never truly kind. They stopped at Camp 4, perched at a terrifying 26,000 feet, the gateway to the death zone, where oxygen is scarce and the human body begins to die with every passing second. This was the final staging ground before the ultimate push. Oxygen tanks were checked, layers adjusted, a final deep breath. Then, the final ascent began. The climb was grueling. Every step burned. The air was razor-thin, each breath a battle. Christopher pushed through the agony, his heart hammering against his ribs, muscles screaming for relief. Then, he was there. At the summit of Everest, Christopher stood victorious. The world stretched endlessly below him. The sunrise painted the sky in hues of fire and gold. He had done it, conquered the highest peak on Earth. But Everest does not let go so easily. As they began their descent, something was wrong. Christopher felt an odd tightness in his chest. His breathing grew labored, as if he were inhaling through a straw. His hands trembled, his vision blurred. His teammates noticed immediately. Concern flashed in their eyes. They urged him forward, knowing that getting down is always more dangerous than going up. Then, without warning, Christopher collapsed. Panic surged through the group. They tried to rouse him, to force oxygen into his lungs, but the truth was undeniable. This was not altitude sickness. This was something far deadlier. Christopher had suffered a cardiac arrest. His heart had failed him, not in the safety of his home, not in a hospital bed, but on the slopes of the deadliest mountain on Earth. Everest had claimed him. There was no chance to save him. No helicopters could reach them in time, no miracle rescues at this altitude. He was gone, but in the wake of tragedy, his family found a small comfort. He died doing what he loved. He had faced the mountain, stood at the top of the world, and etched his name into history. Now, his spirit remains forever woven into Everest's icy winds, whispering through the peaks, a reminder that no matter how strong, how determined, Everest always has the final say. The wind roared like a vengeful spirit as Kuriki stood atop Denali, the highest peak in North America. The year was 2004, and the elements seemed to howl in defiance, testing the limits of his resilience. He had done it, conquered one of the most unforgiving summits on Earth, but he could never have imagined that this moment of triumph would ignite a journey that would spiral from glory to controversy, from adulation to whispers of doubt, and ultimately to the merciless clutches of the world's deadliest mountain. By 2005, Kuriki's name was beginning to carve itself into the annals of mountaineering. One by one, the great peaks fell beneath his feet: Aconcagua, Elbrus, and Kilimanjaro. His relentless ambition was impossible to ignore. The mountaineering world took notice of this unassuming yet tenacious figure. The peaks he conquered. When he reached the summit of Oceania's Karstens Pyramid, it was clear Kuriki was destined for greatness. The momentum only grew. By 2007, his conquest of Cho Oyu and Vinson Massif secured his place among the elite. A television documentary immortalized his triumphs, launching him into the limelight. Fame followed. So did sponsors, eager to be associated with the rising star. With every ascent, his legend expanded, his status elevating beyond the cold, desolate peaks he had made his home. He became more than a climber. He became a symbol of ambition, of pushing beyond human limits. But the higher he climbed, the darker the shadows beneath him became. Doubts began to whisper through the mountaineering community. Kuriki's claims of solo alpine-style ascents without supplemental oxygen were met with scrutiny. Whispers turned into accusations. Could he really have done it alone? The revelations of his reliance on guides and fixed ropes cast a shadow over his declarations of independence. The contradictions in his accounts, particularly on Kilimanjaro, where a guide is mandatory, only fueled the skepticism. Was he the fearless soloist he claimed to be, or was there another truth lurking beneath the surface? Then came the failures, the brutal, humiliating setbacks that no amount of sponsorships or television specials could erase. Unsuccessful attempts on Everest, Annapurna, and Shishapangma tarnished his once flawless record. His decisions were questioned, his rushed schedules, his dangerous acclimatization strategies. Everything was scrutinized under the harsh, unforgiving light of public opinion. His 2009 Everest attempt ended in exhaustion and altitude sickness, forcing him to turn back in disgrace. Then, in 2012, Everest took its first real piece of him. A devastating failure on Shishapangma left him frostbitten, his body ravaged by the mountain's icy grip. 9 fingers, lost forever to the cold. The world watched, expecting this to be the end. But Kuriki was not one to yield. In 2014, he clawed his way back to success with a triumphant ascent of Broad Peak. It was meant to be his redemption. It wasn't. The years that followed were a relentless storm of missteps. Failures in 2015, 2016, and 2017 turned him into a figure of mockery. The internet was merciless. His name, once celebrated, became a subject of ridicule. The great climber, the man who had dared to challenge the sky, was now the punchline to a cruel joke. But Kuriki was not finished. Determined to reclaim his glory, he set his sights on Everest once more. This time, he would do the impossible, an ascent via the perilous southwest face, one of the most treacherous routes. No supplemental oxygen, no safety net. This would be his masterpiece, his final declaration to the world that he belonged among the legends. But legends are not made without sacrifice. On May 21, 2018, Kuriki began his ascent. The world, once captivated by his triumphs, now watched with a mixture of doubt and morbid curiosity. The jubilant explorer who had once commanded admiration was now a solitary figure against Everest's vast, indifferent expanse. His support had waned. His sponsors had abandoned him. His reputation had crumbled beneath him like an unstable ice shelf. Still, he climbed. Then fate struck: illness. It seeped into his body like a slow poison, sapping his strength, clouding his mind. He pressed on, but the mountain does not forgive weakness. At 7,400 meters, the sickness worsened. His breathing became ragged. A persistent cough racked his body, each gasp of thin air an agonizing battle. Pain burned through his chest. He knew something was wrong. Desperation clawed at him. He sent a radio message to his climbing guides at Camp 2, his voice barely more than a whisper. Help. He needed help. The guides responded immediately, fighting their way through the brutal night, the freezing darkness swallowing every step. But Everest is vast. Everest is merciless. Then, silence. The radio cut off. The guides, struggling against the mountain's relentless assault, could not find him in the dark. Time slipped away, vanishing into the howling winds. Somewhere in that frozen abyss, Kuriki, alone and battered, continued his desperate fight against the inevitable. And then, Everest took him. In the dead of night, weakened beyond the point of return, Kuriki lost his footing. He fell down the treacherous slope, his body battered by the very mountain he had spent his life trying to conquer. The cold seeped into his bones, the icy fingers of hypothermia tightening their grip. In those final moments, did he regret? Did he realize that Everest had never been his to conquer, that it had merely allowed him to climb, to dream, before finally demanding its price? The next day, they found him. His body lay at 7,200 meters near Camp 2. His journey, his desperate, relentless quest for redemption, had ended in the unforgiving embrace of Everest. The news rippled through Japan, through the climbing world. Shock, mourning, reflection. Some called him a hero, others whispered of arrogance, of ambition unchecked. But in the end, Kuriki's story is not merely one of triumph or failure. It is a tale of human will, of ambition that defied reason, of the unbreakable bond between man and mountain. It is a reminder that no matter how skilled, how prepared, how determined, we are all at the mercy of forces far greater than ourselves, and Everest always has the final say.